thanks to all you all for showing up.
Well, thanks, Matt, for having me. Thanks all for coming here today. Anybody frustrated with the fact that democracy doesn't always seem to work the way you would like it to? Well, that's our topic here today, and I'm especially happy to be here with fellow Johnnies and Bennies. As you know, we're very pleased to be a graduate of this fine institution, as are all 6 of my brothers and sisters. So I've orchestrated this presentation just for you today, which will be reinforced exclusively with my own photos. I want to protect everybody's intellectual property, so everything you see today will be pictures that I have taken, to shed light on how we have our two parties work better together. Instead of this constant tug of war that always is going on, cutting each other down, blaming the other person, how do we figure out a way where we learn to play nice with those that are different from us, so that we can address some of those big issues we need to face, like a seemingly endless cascade of fiscal cliffs, and the need to welcome hardworking, industrious people to our shores, and get past this headwind that's really at us to find our path to brighter skies in the future. That's what we're hoping to talk about today. First of all, I want to address a couple of misconceptions. There are some folks that think you can take the politics out of politics. It's really not possible, and it's really not the solution. Whenever I give a tour of the Capitol, I always bring them to the rotunda and to the picture of John Trumbull's painting of the Declaration of Independence. And I point out there that Trumbull did something in the painting to show you that there was conflict between the two founders of our two-party system, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. Does anybody know what the conflict is that he shows? Well, if you look close, you see we have somebody who knows? So tell us what it is. So if you look close, he has Jefferson reaching over and stepping on Adams' toe to reflect that conflict. And that conflict is really policy conflict. One was for a strong federal government. One was for strong state rights. So the conflict came from policy differences. But they still got the politics right and got the Declaration of Independence signed. So the challenge isn't that we have a two-party system with different policy views. The challenge is how do we get the politics right to make sure we get done what needs to get done. Another, of course, recent movie done talked about how Lincoln got an important conflict done. That was, of course, eliminating the vampires. Was that? Oops, wrong Lincoln movie. Of course, I'm speaking of the other Lincoln movie about how there was serious differences about whether we should abolish slavery. And if you haven't watched that movie, I encourage you to, because what you saw was just raw politics to get it done. It's politics that solves the difference between policy conflicts. And I would tell you that policy is often trumps and needs to be trumped by getting politics right. If you truly want to make a difference, the world's most pressing challenges do not remain unsolved because we don't have policy solutions for them. We have plenty of policy solutions. The challenge is getting politics right. And that's why we say at the school that I lead, the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University, where we're the first and foremost school of politics, that that's the place where you should go if you really truly want to make a difference. We focus on campaigning. Winning campaigns, whether we're unique from all the policy schools that you see around. There's good policy schools. We're not saying anything bad about a Humphrey or a Kennedy. We're just saying we're different. We teach campaigning, whether it be for electoral office, whether it be to campaign to advance legislation, or whether it be to impact public opinion. We are to politics what the Kennedy School is to policy. Second misconception. Politicians are our biggest problem. There is no doubt that politicians are part of the problem. Because when you look at the fact that most districts are more concerned about a primary fight than a general election fight, that's a big part of the gridlock that we face today. And each member of Congress, when it comes to redistricting, is always angling to keep their district safer than the others. That's part of it. The fact that we have these filibuster rules is another part of it. But I would say if you really want to find the true core problem that we face with the gridlock we see today, you just need to look in the mirror. Because we, the people, are a large source of that problem. You don't have to keep your eyes open too much to realize that there are a wide range of differing point of views out there amongst the populace. And I can tell you, when I grew up in northern Minnesota, we only got one TV station. We got NBC out of Walker. It's the only station we got in Pequot Lakes, Minnesota. So everybody in Pequot got their news from the same source. But what's happened today? Today, with the explosion of electronic media and electronic devices, everybody gets their own information, self-reinforcing what they want to hear. Thousands of different outlets giving you messages that you self-select largely because you agree with it. That is causing a horizontal nature of media, which was before creating a common point of reference for everybody in society. That fragmentation of media has led to a greater fragmentation of society, causing society to be more differentiated amongst each other, more conflict with each other than they ever have been before, creating a very narrow view and narrow perspective that they take to these issues. Not only that, but there's hundreds, indeed thousands or millions of organizations that are reinforcing them to be that narrow point of view, which doesn't always get you to the right conclusion. Let me give you one example. How many of you have seen this movie, Fahrenheit 9/11? We have a few here that have seen the movie. How did I do in the movie? Well, if you go to trailer on Fahrenheit911.com, you'll see that not only am I in the movie, not only am I in the trailer, I'm the cover of the trailer. And this was a case where I was walking back from a vote in the Capitol, reading stuff as you always are, because there's so much to study and all these issues that you're having to address. And all of a sudden I look up and there's this overweight guy with a mic, a camera right in front of my face asking me questions. Now, folks thought that I should have got an Oscar for this. Best actor in a conscripted role. But I didn't. And can anybody tell me what question Michael Moore asked me? Anybody remember the question? Well, if you don't remember the question, you probably don't remember the answer. The question he asked me, would you help get more members of Congress to get their children to join the Army? And what was my answer? I gave a great answer, but he didn't like my answer, so he only included the expression on my face. But my expression on my face apparently worked in the movie because it gave people the impression that I wasn't for having kids of congressmen and women in the military. But the reason I have this confused look in my face is because I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to convince my son to go into the Army if he's already committed to the Navy? Now, Charles, of course, is a St. John's Prep grad. He went to Notre Dame. If he would have been, wise enough to go to St. John's, at least he'd be able to see his team win a national championship. But if you stop and think about this result, what you find is that it's reinforcing these narrow points of views. He came to the wrong conclusion, but he still made millions doing it. And he reinforced people's very narrow view on one side of a political spectrum. That is further dividing society. In that, our elected representatives are a reflection of society. It's really the division within society that you see reflected in the division within Congress or any other legislative body like here in Minnesota. So if we really want to get to win-win politics, we need to try to figure out, how do we counteract that? And politics actually has to up its game because it's gotten more challenging with this fragmentation of society. I would suggest to you that win-win politics, if you want to win a campaign, you have to focus on differences and define those in campaigns. I know that. I'd always focus. You have 5 issues is all you have, but three of them have to be differences with your opponent, and you got to emphasize that. Clearly, we have differences within the Kennedy family. One of the biggest travesties in my life was losing my son to the dark side and become a Packer fan. The weights we have to carry. But the good news is, when you take it to the next level and better politicians focus on building coalitions that move beyond agitation to action. Even though I can't get him to be a Viking fan, at least we all agree that Minnesota is the state of hockey. That's taking politics to the next level. But the level that we really need to get to, the best political leaders are those that unify a fragmented society to pursue a common purpose. And that's the goal you have to have if you really, truly want to be amongst the best political leaders. Let's talk about the path to how we get there. The first thing we need to do is seek decisions. Not just agitation, but decisions. And many of you are too young to remember the Tarrington advertisements for cigarettes where they said, "I'd rather fight than switch." That seems to be the motto of just about everybody in the political process today. But I prefer the quote of one of my heroes, Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "In a moment of decision, the best thing to do is the right thing, the next best thing to do is the wrong thing, and the worst thing to do is nothing." And if you think of the biggest issues we face as a society, how to deal with our debt, how to deal with immigration, I would suggest to you that the worst thing to do in either of those is nothing. Almost any of the policy solutions that are being talked about are better than the status quo. So the challenge is we got to get past this friction that's causing us to do nothing and figure out how we can do something to solve the pressing issues facing us. When you have a Senate in the U.S. that is 60 votes to get past the filibuster, it almost invariably requires you to appeal to at least somebody on the other side. I say Republicans haven't had 60 votes in the Senate for 90 years, and I don't want to wait 90 years to get something done. Democrats have had it for transient periods of time, but lose it if they don't figure out that you have to appeal, at least in part, to the other party. And when you have folks agitating on either side, whether it be Tea Party on the right or the redistributionist Occupy folks on the left, they just make the challenge of getting to yes in the 60 votes in the Senate even harder for politicians. This is my best picture of our political process today. I took in some modern art museum in Brussels of a guy who's all ready to go. He's got his suitcases ready to go, but he can't even see the opportunities for agreement in front of them because the anchors are down on both the left and the right. And with those anchors down on the left and the right, he can't really move anywhere. We need to get past that. Next step you need to do, besides taking an attitude that we want to get to a decision and we need to get to a decision, is you need to see 360. You can't really find those opportunities if you can't see the whole perspective. We are all products of our own environment. We, like a submarine, are surrounded by our experiences. Where we grew up, what school we went to, what major was, what our parents do, where we work at, who our friends like or don't like. All those things create a shell around what you can experience. So the challenge is you need to try your best, like a submarine that puts up its periscope and gets that full 360-degree view around it, to find ways where you can get that broader view, to really find the opportunities for reaching agreement, reaching decisions. That means that you have to look to your natural side, which, as you know, for me is to the right. You need to try to keep your eyes open as you look to the other side, which apparently I wasn't focusing on enough here. And you need to fully examine everything in between. I say in this 360, you need to understand the business perspective, the political perspective, and you need to understand that globally. And let me just give you one example. If you go to London, they have a bike program. It's half funded by Barclays. So the City of London gets this nice bike program all over London. They only have to pay for half of it because Barclays pays for the other half. How much benefit does that to Barclays? What are the benefits Barclays gets from that? Free well, it's free, they pay for it, but it's advertising everywhere. You can't avoid it because they always see these Barclays right here. What else do they get? Good reputation for what? And what kind of things are they being associated with bike riding? Health, green. Absolutely, there's no carbon emission here, and it's healthy. You're out there on two big issues they get associated with. Why wouldn't they want to do? You go to Washington, it's by some obscure capital bike shares, so they didn't seem to take the need to get the extra money to have some big organization sponsor it. But apparently we have enough money in Washington, so we don't really need to think about those creative solutions. But this is an example of, by not taking that full 360-degree view and saying, how could business help me with the challenge that I'm trying to solve as a government? And what global solutions out there that we could learn from? I've focused really throughout my career to try to expand my own 360-degree view. not just engaging the economic leaders here in America, but around the world, here with 3M in Shanghai, with Deloitte in Dubai, with local leaders in Kuwait City. Not just the political leaders here in America, but with who I hope will soon be the former president of Syria, Assad, with Prime Minister Ariel Sharon of Israel, and with King Fisher in India. Also engaging the community leaders, with the Pope in Rome, with the Patriarch in Istanbul, been in 10 predominantly Muslim countries, not just refugee camps in Thailand, but with our military here with Petraeus in Mosul, with our Joint Command in Korea, with our peacekeepers in Bosnia, and teaching around the world, whether it be London, Sao Paulo, Istanbul, or Doha, Qatar. I can tell you that each and every one of you needs to focus on how you can expand your 360-degree vision, and you don't necessarily need to be a member of Congress because of it. Let me give you your first steps. We are a full-spectrum school that deals with people of all political ideologies at our school. Because we're not a policy school, we're policy agnostic. We just want to help you advance your cause. So, of course, I went to both conventions, as we'll talk about here in a second. But I encourage both of them to think broadly. We have China Daily and Politico right beside each other, free in Washington. So when I teach my classes, I give my students an extra credit opportunity. If you can find anything good about the American government on the front page of Politico, or anything bad said about the Chinese government on the front page of China Daily, you get extra credit. So far, I haven't had to give any extra credit. The point of that story is each media publication has its own slant. You need to know the slant. Not only need to know the slant, you need to get diverse slants. So when I went to that Democratic convention in Charlotte, this was the news that was put out for the participants at the hotel I stopped by and picked up my tickets at. And it had a wide range of news with New York Times featured prominently, but there was no Wall Street Journal there. Although I did go to the Republican convention, I didn't see a news table, but if I did, you would see the Wall Street Journal figured prominently, but there would probably be no New York Times there. So what I'm telling you is that you want to read both the Wall Street Journal editorial page, which is oftentimes viewed as the voice of the right, and the New York Times editorial page, the voice of the left, and do something to give yourself a broader international view, at a minimum, reading The Economist. So I would encourage all of you to read all three of these on a regular basis to really broaden your view, and you will be able to see things in a much more 360 fashion. Not only do you need to see 360, you need to speak 360. There are wide differences amongst the parties and people on a number of issues. Let me just point out one, economic. The great hero economist of the left is Keynes, who believes that government stepping forward and driving the economy with the spending projects is the way to drive the economy. On the right, you find that it's Hayek and his disciple Friedman here in America that says we ought to let the market drive the economy. So there is this conflict going on between a top-down or bottom-up on the approach. And these two economists have been fighting each other for a century. They each have strong followers. They each have strong academic support for each what they're doing. So you can't just say the other side's crazy. You need to be able to address the legitimate urges that are driving them to believe what they're saying. I would suggest to you, if you look at two politicians, Obama and Bush, whatever you think of them, they still won 2 national elections, so they're decent politicians. Whether you think they are good presidents is a separate question. Here you see Obama talking about the market that has the power to generate wealth and expand freedom that is unmatched. Clearly speaking Hayek, even though he's a Keynesian, because he realizes that if he's going to get that 60 votes in the Senate, he needs to be appealing to the legitimate urges that the Hayek folks believe in. Similarly, you see Bush talking about instead of laboring on the edge of subsistence and things like the Homestead Act and the Social Security Act and the GI Bills, most of which are Keynesian, but he again realized that even though he prefers the Hayek view of how you drive economic prosperity, he needs to appeal the other side. So if you're going to get your stuff passed, you need to be able to figure out how to communicate what you're trying to do in a way that appeals to legitimate urges of the other side, even if you don't necessarily agree with their method of accomplishing those motivations. You could go through the same analysis on any number of other issues, the difference on foreign policy, whether U.S. should lead or whether we should defer to the UN, and I could bring you examples of Bush and Obama on these as well, or any number of issues. You need to learn to speak 360. Then you need to find common ground, and don't expect to trade a bag of beads for the state of Oklahoma. It isn't going to work. And expect to be meeting at places that are just a little bit different than what you're used to. But know that opposites can work well together. You know, cookies and milk are very opposite of one another, but they work well together, and you ought to take that attitude when you're going out and finding people to work with. Let me give you a couple of tips as to how to do it. Don't use party as a crutch. Only 1.5% of challengers beat incumbent members of Congress. I was one of those 1.5%, but during my race, I never let the press people that were putting out releases for me ever mention the word Republican or Democrat. Under the idea, if you can't explain it without having to resort to just saying this is the Republican way or the Democrat way, you clearly don't understand the issue well enough. So you do need to take the time to study the issues yourself, not just go by the talking points that the caucus is putting out for you. And you need to listen to your constituents, what's really important to them, if you're really going to find that solution to the challenges out there. Once you get into the legislature or the Congress, you need to focus on similarities. What do we have in common? I would make a point of getting to know Democrats in Congress, and I took the attitude that we may disagree on 99 out of 100 issues, but we could work together on that one issue. So I had 20 different Democrats that co-sponsored bills with me, and it was maybe the only thing we agreed on that we co-sponsored on. But that doesn't mean that you can't work with them on that issues. And sometimes you have to not only know the person, what is their background, also know their district. Sometimes they have a business or an organization in their district, or a brother or sister that does some type of occupation that is really on your side on this issue that will have them act outside of their normal party norm. Those are the types of things you need to look for. I would also promote to you the idea of travel. Sometimes foreign travel, CODELs as they're called, congressional delegations, gets criticized, but everybody then will, in the next sentence, complain nobody knows each other from the other side. When you spend some time traveling internationally, they're forced to be almost equal balance of Republicans and Democrats. So when you're with a New York congresswoman that's Democrat in Babylon, you're able to work with her much better. The other thing I would tell you is that one of the things we do to help democracy work is that we have Republicans and Democrats going to school together, developing bonds. On the Democrat side, you can see this was our election night party. We have enthusiastic supporters of Obama, and our graduates include the presidents of Emily's lists, as well as the chiefs of staff for 2 Democrat senators on the Hill. On the Republican side, we have equally robust Republican advocates, and our graduates include Romney's campaign managers and the chief of staff of Republican Representative Latta. I could go through a whole long other list of Republicans and Democrats throughout Washington and the world that are graduates of our program. But the point is, I always encourage them, get to know the people of your other party in your class, because they will be important resources for you going forward. I remember the one guy saying that he had this very liberal woman that came into his class, and she made a comment later on how after a few classes, she says, I always used to think you guys were sort of, evil, and once you get to know you, you're actually not so bad. And it's that type of getting to know you that we need to have people doing on both sides. The other thing you get at our school is that my office is 4 blocks from the White House. And in between is the IMF and World Bank, and both the IMF and World Bank rent their land from George Washington University. So we, in recent years, have had both Obama and Bush, both Secretary Kerry and Rumsfeld, both Senator Harkin and Rubio, both Carville and Rove, Huffington and Scarborough, and really hundreds of other speakers, because we are so convenient. And in our building, we have an auditorium where they used to film Crossfire. So the media knows how to get to our building, and we're all set up for them when they get there. That also, hearing from both sides, helps you have that broader view. When you look at what you want to be in this picture, between the statue and the pigeon, fixed forever in one position or having some degree of flexibility, you need to have flexibility. And I'm not saying compromise your core principles. I'm just saying have some flexibility in how you can address it. If you really like people to eat healthy breakfasts, encourage them to eat healthy breakfasts, but don't tell them it has to be strawberries versus blueberries or bananas. Just tell them we need to eat healthy. Similarly, if you want to cut spending, being overly prescriptive about which spending you're going to cut, which tap you're going to loosen up to drain the swamp, you ought not to be that picky about. And if you want them to have more revenue, don't be that picky about how they're going to fill up the tank again. Be flexible, stay to your core principles, but don't have to be over-prescribing. The final thing I'll tell you on this category is that politics is a game of addition, not subtraction. You have to constantly remind people that this is the case. Let me give you an example of how this works. My FAST bill, FAST Act, was the only amendment to pass the House Transportation Bill. It wasn't because President Bush was for it. He opposed it. It wasn't because the Republican chairman of the Transportation Committee was for it. He opposed it. It wasn't because the Democrat ranking member was for it. He opposed it as well. So all the leadership was against me. How do you get it passed? It's a game of addition, not subtraction. First of all, you start thinking that when you have the 6th District of Minnesota, which has probably the longest commute in the state, they want more lanes, opportunity. This provided for privately funded toll lanes that if they were new, not for existing lanes. But then you also got to get members of Congress to do it, so you got to reach out to them through places that they're reading, like the Washington Post. But then you need to figure out other urges that you can address. So the Wall Street Journal editorialized in favor of mine, recognizing that if you're going to have more lanes funded through privately funded tolls, you're going to need less reason for gas tax. So this became the anti-tax vote as well. But then what really sealed the deal was the truckers. Truckers liked the provision that this prohibited tolls on existing lanes, because they knew who would disproportionately be the 1% that everybody was going after if that was the case. So I got on the Trucking Bozo on Sirius Radio at midnight. And truckers have nothing to do at midnight other than listen to you on Trucking Bozo. And I told them, here's the number to call the switchboard of the U.S. House. Here's the website, and even back then they had in their computers internet access where they could look up, here's the website you go, put in your zip code, it'll tell you who your members of Congress is, and call your member of Congress, tell them, support the FAST Act amendment. As I was walking to the floor the next day, after I also went on the Open Road Cafe at 6 o'clock in the morning, a member of Congress came up to me and says, all right, Kennedy, I'll vote for your FAST Act. Just tell the truckers to stop calling. I've had over 1,000 truckers call me. So when you weave together all those additions of people that are pushing for your bill, that's how you can overcome the resistance of an administration and committee leadership that is opposing you. Similar way, whereas I had 33 Democrats ending up supporting me on the FAST Act, when I went for more responsible defense spending in a similar approach, I had 44 Democrats supporting me. Finally, you need to have the courage to act. Oftentimes, when you are doing that act that's a little bit different than what people are expecting of you or somebody in the district doesn't like, you're going to get criticized, but if it's the right thing to do, you need to do that. You need to not always be that just happy yes person, always nodding your head and doing what everybody wants, because you can't. There are differing points of view. And you have to not worry about whether the Star Tribune is going to take this as an opportunity to write a cartoon about you as you go along the way. So that is part of the final process for getting democracy to work. As we look at it, as we've mentioned, it really is the need to find agreement, and that is politics, how politics trumps policy. I'm pleased to be at a school where we are the first and foremost school of politics. And that can help us, I believe, as we face serious headwinds. And I think that we're at a crossroads right now, but we can avoid the crash up that could happen if we learn to balance all these other interests out there and tap that inner urge in all of us that wants to be that superhero, that wants to do something that leaves the world in a better place. If we jump in, put this puzzle together, we can leave the world a better place for all of our children. Thank you. So with that, I'll be happy to take whatever questions folks might have. There must be questions.
Okay. I'm seriously considering going into politics after graduation. Would you suggest going to graduate school before getting involved in politics? Or...
You know, one of the big challenges that we're facing is that some folks say you don't need a graduate degree in politics, that it's a learn-by-doing profession. They said the same thing about law schools when law was an apprentice profession. They said the same things about business before Wharton started doing MBAs. Intriguingly, a lot of the folks that are in politics have been successful, say you don't really need a master's. I'll be about another 2 minutes into the conversation, they're saying, boy, Republicans got waxed on the digital front this last election. And I say, you're right. And if you're going to take the approach that I'm going to learn by doing and try to figure out how it is I manage digital analytics and all the modern technologies and how you apply those to campaigns, you're going to get waxed repeatedly. So politics is becoming increasingly a sophisticated game, a sophisticated activity. And so I think there are many areas where it can be beneficial to you. The other reason I would suggest why it makes a lot of sense is this is a networking business. And you will find yourself in about 5 different iterations if the field of politics is the field you wish to go in. You'll be spending some time in a campaign. You'll probably spend some time in a legislative office. You'll spend time perhaps in an advocacy firm. You'll go through about 5 iterations. Having an alumni pool of 3,000 that you're also fellow GSPMers in our case helps you significantly. And many of our students say, yes, we got a good education, but the value of that network is equally as valuable to us. So if you're really going to take this profession seriously and you want to have it be something that can last, you know, throughout your career, as opposed to a short 2-3 year spell before you go out to do something else, I would encourage it. Now, I may be biased in this, leading a school in this case. I will admit to that. So I may not have a full. No. It's not at the SJU level yet. I tell folks that Notre Dame has the most obnoxiously loyal alumni, but St. John's is a very close second. So it's you're at the right school from a networking perspective. Another travesty I had in my life is I had a Tommy working for me, and we had a guy who came to apply for a position we had that was a St. John's undergrad, a St. Thomas MBA, and the Tommy that was working for me said, well, should we interview him or just give him the job? We ended up interviewing, but we did give him the job. So it is a great network. But again, politics is a game of addition. Multiply your networks. If you look at the bipartisan reputation of St. John's as St. Ben's as a place to go into public life, there are few schools on a per capita basis that can match St. John's, St. Ben's. So it's a great network to have. I encourage you to make the right decision. But multiplying is not a bad thing to do either. Other questions?
As you see both the political and public discourse around issues becoming more adversarial and how it tends to be reinforcing the cycle of the downward spiral becoming more opposed rather than being more valuable, what do you think is something that we should change to affect that manner of communication?
Well, I think, again, the steps I outline can help. But, you know, I do a lot of critiquing. For example, let's just say that you're a real Tea Party conservative. How you doing? You didn't support Boehner on the last debt ceiling crisis. You punted it over to the Senate. you got more cuts in defense spending than you would have if you would have taken Boehner's path. You didn't support Boehner on the $1 trillion and the increase in over $1 million for taxes. You punted it over to the Senate, which is in the hands of the other side. You get tax increases over $400 million. You need to, first of all, take a step back and say, we want to focus on results. I'm not, in this case, critiquing. Again, we're a politics school, not a policy school. So I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to say whether the Tea Party has the right goals or not. I'm saying they got the wrong tactics. And the tactics that they're taking, which are more confrontational, are getting them worse results than if they took a more seasoned political approach. So if you really believe in those causes, you need to take a step back and you need to say, hey, wait, guys, this is not getting us to where we want to be going. How can we be getting there? And so I think part of the urge that will cause a more a reasoned approach is because they'll see that this taking the edges on issues that need to be solved. The challenge conservatives had is in many cases they say, we don't want Congress to act on many issues. We just assume, nothing happened. But in these couple of cases, there is a need for action. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Kate. Well, if you look at the cases where where Boehner scolded several for not voting party line, is because they weren't being at all collaborative with anybody. In any given normal distribution, if you got a caucus, there's going to be a fringe on the left and a fringe on the right. The mathematics work out. If Boehner's got to get it done, and the most conservative 5 people don't go with him, where does he need to get the next 5 votes? From the center. Needs to go that much more liberal. And so I think the scolding is not in any way, shape, or form saying Boehner's trying to make this work, and he's realizing that he needs to do something that will clear the threshing floor, and yet these people aren't for clearing the threshing floor. They're for some form of standing up and telling everybody no, and somehow everybody will be happy back home and they'll get reelected, but you won't get a result. So I think Boehner's approach was really trying to get them to be more collaborative by saying, if we're going to try to get this done instead of handing the ball to the other side, we need to have support. So it's difficult. So would you like to be Speaker of the House? You've got a couple hundred people that all think they're prima donnas, and all think that they're the ones who's got the right answer, and they have a range. There's the difference between a New York Republican and a Texan Republican is radically different. And Boehner it's herding cats. It's getting frogs in the wheelbarrow that he's got to do. And Boehner has actually been less heavy-handed than just about any speakers in the past. And so some folks have said, you're not as effective enough because you haven't been heavy-handed with your members. So it's a struggle. Now, I again may be biased. I won that seat by 155 votes with 0 national support. But the first member of Congress that came out to Renville County, Minnesota with me was John Boehner. So I happen to have been on Boehner's side and would perhaps, if given a choice, remain on Boehner's side. Just trying to give you the slant that I have so that you guys can evaluate and take information from multiple sources and have that full 360-degree view. Other questions?
You were planning to open up your expand your horizon, and do you think that this difficulty is, what if you see a conflict in different sources? And how do you deal with that? And that's not the way I used to see it. And how do you commit yourself with is it change or?
Well, you don't have to change those sources. You're not going to change those sources. But I think being able to see the differences and weigh them will give you a broader, more full perspective. and you'll be able to make better decisions yourself. So when you start seeing the differences, that's when you're starting to have that 360. I've spent more of my life as a retailer than as a member of Congress or in politics. And as a retailer, I saw things that I guarantee you most men never see when they walk into a store. You know, you can tell whether or not one particular product's selling better, whether it's presented in the right way, whether there's a common color palette there, whether they're too heavy with clearance than they should be at this time of the year, whether the signing's up right, how are they playing their end caps, all these stuff that you never see as just a guy who's going in there for a toothpaste and getting out. In a similar way, if you study all these, you'll be able to see things in the cracks in the corners that you would never see if you just took your message from one source. Yes, Kate.
Other than the media and ourselves, I guess, as you talked about for kind of Congress not being able to distribute as people in Congress as they want, are there instructions with Congress that have changed in recent years that also can cause that really slow, clumsy kind of?
Well, there's a number of structures. First of all, everybody is coming home. Because campaigning is getting more competitive, so you're spending less time with each other. Secondly, I would tell you that our gift rules are hurting the ability to collaborate. Let me just give you one example. If you wanted to take a Republican and a Democratic member and have them in your club seats for, pick an event, the Super Bowl, as long as they sat beside each other and talked to each other during that time, you'd be prohibited doing that. But would the collegiality amongst Congress be advanced if there were opportunities where people, but it's gotten to the point where you can't even, buy them a bag of chips to get together anymore. So there's absolutely no opportunity because of these too inane limits on ability for outside organizations to help participate in this. Secondly, those that do help have very little patience. When we were there in Congress, we had a couple of years where they went to a bipartisan retreat with families that you went off to Greenbrier and some foundation paid for it. So you not only got to know the member, but you got to know their children, their spouse, and the people after doing it a couple of years just said they didn't see enough change, so they cut it. But I thought that was really one of the smartest things to do, because you really don't see the other side unless there are events that make it happen, because your schedule is busy, you're raising money, you're meeting with constituents, you're learning about legislation, you're going back home. So when you get to the Congress, you go to your caucus meeting in the morning on Tuesday or Wednesday. You sit largely with your caucus. Many people are from a district where they really don't have to worry about what the other side thinks in order to win it. And there aren't those opportunities for mingling. So I think those are just two areas that have made it more difficult. And then you've got people criticizing Codels, when I truly do think that's a true bonding experience. If you've traveled for 3-4 days with somebody, you're going to get to know them better. Now, I never went to any place that anybody would give me criticize as being a nice beach with sandy beaches and palm trees. I only went to places most people would not want to go on their vacation, so I didn't get any criticism that way. But I still think they're good. Yes, Catherine. Again, I would say, going back to my slide about focus on healthy breakfasts as opposed to which healthy breakfast is the main thing. And recognize the limits of the fact that you can't fight something with nothing. I can't tell you how many times I would tell people that they say, I don't want this. Okay, well, this is a real issue in our country. What's your solution for it? And a lot of times when you come to try to wrestle with your solution for it, you're going to find a path where the two of you can come together on something. You take the immigration issue. You had people from both sides. One side absolutely doesn't want the 11 million people to have something that's anything close to amnesty. The other would like to give it to them tomorrow. If you're having either one of those, it ain't going to happen. So they came up with something that was in the middle. They came up with, here's some alternative. Now, if you don't like that, what is your solution? So forcing yourself to focus on the end that you're trying to achieve. I'm not trying to have you compromise your end. I'm just trying to have you think intelligently about how you can really get there in a way that it'll pass 60 votes in the Senate. And don't just say no to something if there is a big urge to make it happen. Figure out what's my solution. You had a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask a follow-up to you when you talked about selective media earlier, it's selectively consuming media. There's so many radio and TV news programs out there nowadays that have about this much news and about this much opinion. What role do you think programs like that have in this confrontational society that we're living in now?
Well, they're clearly contributing to it and clearly reinforcing each side's point of view. Intriguing thing, if you just flick back and forth between those channels, you will find that they're different. So watching both of them from time to time makes sense. Actually, people say that part of the reason why CNN's ratings are going down so far is because people are going to one edge or the other, Fox or MSNBC. And if you look at the top 10 best-selling books, there's usually always a off-the-edge liberal and off-the-edge conservative that's in the top 10 list, but almost never a balanced point of view. So it's going to be hard to change it in society. What you, though, can do to try to find that right solution is to make sure that you're pulling selective sources from both. I would always have, and do today, so I have in the old days I'd walk into my office and I'd have the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, Minneapolis Star Tribune, and of course the St. Cloud Times. You can't go without the St. Cloud Times. Funny thing, you would watch and do that sometime. Go out in the library and see what's the headline and what's the slant of the headline and where is it placed. Whereas in some cases, it'll be in the front page, top headline, and in the other cases, it'll be in pages B4, the same story. And the slant will be completely different. So you just have to do that a while. Now I'm on the iPad world, so I do have, my iPad subscriptions to all those that I can go through. Any other questions? That'd be great. Happy to do so. And thanks for your interest.